Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. And with the NBA Combine in the books, there's no better week to do it. I'm your host, Maxwell Baumbach. I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing tonight?
Maxwell, I'm great. We were texting earlier today. I was very happy that the Thunder won. You were miserable, I think was your exact words. I was
exaggerating. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I just feel terrible for Jokic more than anything.
He's going to drink himself into happiness based on the quotes that I was reading. A lot of beers in his future. It'll be all right. But man, today has been such a fun, busy day. We got a inflatable pool for the house, so all of the neighborhood kids already come over to our place now that we have water in a plastic container. They all want to come over even more now. So it's been exciting, man. How about you? How's your weekend been going?
Pretty good. As you might be able to hear, I'm coming off like my 95th illness of the year. Like I'm just sick all the time now. It's like everyone says like, oh yeah, once you have kids, you'll be sick all the time. I was like, I never get sick. Now I'm just sick all the time. So that's my life.
So they go to school. It's gonna be awesome.
Yep. So that's what we've got going on. So it's a pretty boring day. Felt good enough. My wife and I have just been like trading shifts all day, being like, all right, do you feel a little not terrible now? All right, you go do it. So was able to just get the kid out on the walk for a little bit. So that was good. But yeah, other than that, extremely boring day. But
I love lazy Sundays, dude. You got to take them.
For sure. And the Combine's in the book. It was I guess get into the Combine overall if you want.
Sure.
I guess we can save that for the scrimmage talk more so.
Let's just get some thoughts out here. Let's exercise a little bit, stretch it out.
I would say overall, coming out of the NBA Combine this year, I feel a little bit more positive about this year's draft class in that everybody measured really well. Last year, I got kind of like a warning text from somebody being like before the Combine, working in the NBA, being like, just so you know, like everyone's going to measure pretty bad. And it was like, oh no. Awesome. And like, that is kind of what happened. Like, even I don't know, like it just felt like even like all the wing defenders that you like were like 6'9", 6'10" wingspan last year. It's like I was hoping for 7'1". Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff. This year we got some gigantic measurements. I feel like very few guys came in like stubby, which we'll get to both ends of that coin in a little bit. But I thought the measurement stuff was good. I thought the athletic testing for the most part everybody did well, or at least like there's nobody that was like shockingly bad. I would say there was no one that I feel like,
bad for Janai Broom.
I felt so bad for him. He didn't even have the worst vertical. But like for example, like there was no situation where it was like, oh no, Janai Broom gained 40 pounds since the season ended. Like there was none of that. So yeah, I feel better about the top of the class coming out of this. I felt like the top of the class generally measured and tested well for the most part. And then I guess we can talk more about the scrimmage stuff later. But I would say overall, my optimism about like the upper crust of this class is higher.
Yeah, I've been telling folks this over the past few days. I really feel good about like my top 18, like particularly. I think I could maybe stretch that out to like 20 to 22. Then after that, there's like a range of prospects, anywhere from like 15 to 20 names that I genuinely feel like I could be talked to, that you could make a strong case for them being drafted in the first round this year. And with the way that the measurements in the Combine had gone, I feel like that number accounts for the growth that I feel like I feel good about some of these names that we're going to be talking about later. I think that there's like 50 players that I like. I have a strong opinion that they should be drafted, which I think is great compared to last year. And a lot of it does have to come down to how some of these folks measured and how some people kind of proved themselves against like competition, So I'm like you, man. I thought the Combine was awesome this year. It was weird having, Jonathan Givony being I think I'm quoting somebody, I forgot who said it, but they said that he was the herald of the Combine measurements. And I thought that was the most apropos way to describe that.
It was interesting that, like the measurements just sort of like trickled out this year, where it's like in years past, it's like, I'm just going to sit on that NBA.com, like measurements profile and refresh. And those weren't up for a couple days this year. But yeah, I thought all in all, positive set of measurements. We're going to talk in the first segment about guys who measured well and guys who measured poorly. Second segment, we're going to talk about those scrimmages and who made their mark. And then in the third segment, we were going to talk about stay or go decisions. We're going to do sort of a lightning round, talking about guys that were in the combine that have eligibility remaining and what we think they should do. Let's talk favorite measurements to start it off. My favorite measurement of the week was Thomas Sorber from Georgetown.
I thought that was my favorite measurement. Yours is the next guy.
We shared. Okay, you can go first then. Yeah, sorry. I like Sorber. Sorber was the other guy I was thinking about picking. So
this was mine. Back off. Back off. So Thomas Sorber and Maxwell, I think would be great because we probably have a lot of listeners that are tuning in relatively later in the draft cycle compared to when we covered the draft and the prospects. So Thomas Sorber, the big man out of Georgetown, freshman prospect, measured in at 6'9" and a quarter without shoes. So you're looking at a guy who's bordering 6'11", which was very encouraging. He weighed in at 262.8 pounds, real strong, built out frame. And this is baby frame. He's going to continue to get stronger as he gets into the NBA, strength and conditioning system. He'll be around 19 come draft time. Had a 7'6" wingspan, so fantastic measurements in that regard. In a 9'1" standing reach. Maxwell, I love that he's 6'11" in shoes. It really made me feel more comfortable projecting him as a starting or even mainstay center in the NBA. And that length really accentuated the numbers that he put up this year. If you remember, Maxwell, he had an offensive rebounding percentage of 9.5, defensive rebounding percentage of almost 22, block percentage over 7.5, steals percentage of 2.7, and he had 127 dunks on the year. With the weight and the strength that he had, that projects out well for screen setting, for sealing off opponents, for maintaining his line on both ends of the court. I just thought that Thomas Sorber really solidified himself as a guy who I've had in like this 13 to 17 range. I've slid him up. He's now the 14th spot, like rounding out my lottery. I feel pretty good about Sorber and how he measured out, and two, just the ease that it gives the numbers and stuff like that. I feel like the projection becomes a little bit more easy with Sorber now.
I agree completely. Sorber is the guy that really grew on me during my final data and film dives. And he was the guy I liked during the year. I wrote that column on him about just the importance of his production. I think it was like Krig's NBA on Twitter that did a thing where he took big men and their translation to the NBA and basic, what were the common carryovers statistically. And one of the biggest ones was assist rate.
Yeah.
And something I looked at for that article was just like the assist rates of centers drafted now versus 10 years ago. And like the bar to be a decision maker in the NBA, even at the center position, even if you're not a guy that's making a lot of decisions, depending on the context, it's a lot higher than it used to be. So for Thomas Sorber to be a guy who has this, top of the line assist rate, assist to turnover ratio, and just this really great feel. I was so impressed, even in games against good competition, despite the fact that he's like a bit heavier footed at times, and the weight and a foot issue, like those are scary things. Like that's where I give myself pause with him. This is a 262 pound guy who had a lower body injury that affected him throughout the year. But his instincts are just top of the line. Like he's always in the right spots. I think the steal rate is a real testament to that. Like really good getting his hands into those pockets when guys look for that pocket pass out of the pick and roll. Really good with his hands in switches, really good throwing his frame on guys and bullying them in switch situations. But again, like he's not one of those guys that is exclusively a switch defender. I thought he did a really good job around the basket of getting into position as a rim protector, even not being the most vertical guy, still maintaining that high block rate during conference play by virtue of his positioning and his timing. I just came away really impressed with him. And having that 7'6" wingspan, like you said, it just makes it so much easier to project him, because I think the concern is you see a guy who's listed at 6'10" in college, and you're like, well, what if this guy's, a center and he's 6'8", and Sorber doesn't really have the jump shot yet. He can make some long twos. He's great at the free throw line, but the three ball sort of eluded him this year. Okay, well, if he's going to be a guy that's, 6'8" with a 6'11" wingspan, that three's got to be there. That's a non-negotiable at that point. Where for him, having that 7'6" wingspan, that's a very Wendell Carter style measurement with the bulky body, the high feel, the passing game. That's the guy that he's kind of reminded me of all year. Where I'm optimistic with Coward is obviously we're not going to know the medical
Sorber
stuff with him, or Sorber. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With Sorber,
we're all thinking about him.
Yeah. With Sorber, we're not going to know the medical stuff. I'm guessing it's not bad since I haven't heard anything. Like I haven't heard anybody be like that foot. So I'm guessing it's fine. I have no intel there. Where the concern lies is he was really inefficient as a scorer for a big man this past year. And he was especially inefficient against top of the line competition. So in 8 games against top 50 teams, he had a 46.7 true shooting percentage, which is like, that's like Nick Smith, Arkansas injury territory. Like that's really bad. Yep. My hope with Sorber is that this amount of length and feel is something where we talk all the time about how we don't like the G League for big guys because you can kind of like beat up on lesser guys. For Sorber, I think it's like actually kind of not a bad scenario. That it's like maybe figure out how to score on these guys first, and then we'll figure it out at the next level. Like I kind of don't hate that. But yeah, I'm really into Sorber all around. Thought it was great that he measured this well.
I like the G League thought. I also think that he does enough kind of big man things to find his way in a rotation early. So even if he's still growing like let's just say that he goes down to the G League, does everything that his NBA coach wants him to do, then he gets caught up. It's still probably going to take him a little bit of time to get used to doing those same offensive things that he was doing in the G League to the NBA level of competition. In the meantime, while he's growing used to that, I still trust the fact that when he was around the basket, he could really put it in there. Again, I listed the dunk numbers earlier. They're incredible. And then again, the rim protection and the rebounding and the ability to, even if you're not going to score as a big man, if you can step out to the elbow, if you can step out to, the wings or whatever and run DHOs, make a couple dribbles and make a short roll pass, I trust him to be able to do those things. And there's still a role for him to be able to do that while he's honing in his offensive skills and rounding out that side of the ball.
Yeah. And then the guy that I wanted to bring up here was Rasheer Fleming, where sort of, a similar-ish scenario in terms of like, well, where is this guy going to actually fall positionally? He'd had a rumored wingspan for a long time of 7'4". And I believe they'd taken a measurement at that Formula 0 rather. Damian Lillard. Yeah, I don't think he was at an F1.
That would be cool. Yes.
Maybe Rasheer Fleming is just like driving race cars on the weekend.
Wouldn't that be the coolest thing? I'd probably bump him up my board even more if he was an F1
sport
guy.
Athlete. Yeah, race car driving. And so Fleming there was like a pretty well documented at some point, like he's got a 7'4" above wingspan scenario. That was out there. He came in at 6'8.25" with a 7'5" wingspan and a 9'1.5" standing reach. So if you're just sort of dropping into the draft cycle now, Rasheer Fleming is a player who predominantly played the 4 at St. Joseph's this year. Scored just about 15 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game. Really shot the ball, which is like what makes him intriguing. Took 4.5 threes per game, made 39% of them. And a really active defensive player, had almost 3 total stocks per game. The question is really just like the feel. Had a negative assist turnover ratio, played a really low usage role on a team with 2 ball dominant guards in Eric Reynolds and Xavier Brown. So the question for Fleming was really like, well, if this guy's a forward, like the ball skills are way behind the curve, him coming in officially with this 7'5" wingspan on the record with a 9'1.5" standing reach makes him a guy that you could comfortably play at a big spot. I kind of thought that's where he was going to settle in anyway. I thought he was closer to like a Jalen Smith type of guy than an OG Anunoby type of guy. Dre in the comments, Maxwell has the most luscious and gorgeous beard I've ever seen. I appreciate that. I do absolutely nothing to it. It's getting shaved probably tomorrow or Tuesday.
Cool fact about Maxwell's beard. He could shave it right now. And if he sneezed hard enough, that beard would be back to where it is right now.
Yeah, it does grow fast. I do the Chia Pet method. I cut the hair and the beard, and then I just let it like all grow simultaneously. So I think Fleming coming in this big is a big relief, because if you're somebody who didn't really believe in the ball skills with Fleming, he's now a guy that you could comfortably play at the 5 or at the 4 alongside another 5. And it's not a thing where it's like he's got to be a wing to make this thing work. And I think it also bodes well to the translation of his defensive ability. High block rate guy, high steal rate guy, good rebounder, all that stuff you can still feel good about. Did really well in the lateral agility testing, move fast.
Yep.
Fleming's a guy I've liked for a long time. He's the guy I did for No Sun after his freshman year. And I think coming in this big kind of gives him an extra degree of safety positionally, where if the ball skill stuff isn't coming around, maybe he can just be kind of that safety valve big that can switch a little bit.
Yeah, as you were breaking him down, you touched on a lot of things that I had in my notes. I literally wrote down, like, how cool is it that he was almost 6'10" in shoes, and does that along with the 7'5.25" wingspan. Does that allow him to play some 5? And as I was watching the playoffs today, I was watching Oklahoma City. I think Rasheer Fleming comp, if all things hit well, could be like a J Will, not J Dub, but a J Will. And it's so long as he gets a little bit stronger, But again, I love his length, his standing reach. They play out in the production. He had 126 dunks on the year, block percentage of 4.9, steal percentage of 2.6, and a defensive rebound percentage of 22.8. And then if you compare that and match that with the 39% shot or 39% shooting that he did from deep with that defensive output, that allows him to be very versatile on both ends of the floor. So like you, I think that that's pretty cool. He could play 4 or 5. The only holdup that I would have, and you touched on it earlier, was the feel aspect. Is he going to be a guy that you can have the offense flow through, or are you looking at specifically a play finisher? Either way, I think that the wingspan and his height measured out favorably for him. Like you, I liked his measurement. I still have Rasheer in my lottery. I'm still wrestling with my 10 through 12 range, which consists of Rasheer, CMB, and Cedric Coward. I'm still trying to figure out how I flush out that 3. That's kind of one of my more difficult spots on the board. But I think that does speak well to Rasheer, because the other 2 names that I just said, they're thought of really well within the draft community, especially as of late.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is well said. And I thought you were pointing about the play finisher thing too. Like, that's another element I like of it, is like he did really well as a roller. And like that's the other thing where it's like, if you just want to roll into the basket, even if the shot's not real, it gives him another out. Like it's a much more legitimate option now to just utilize him as a roller than it may have been a week ago. On the flip side of the coin, who is a guy whose measurements you were not so happy with this week?
Yeah, I want to lead in by saying that I don't think that this is going to make this guy not a good player. I don't think that we should drop him out of top 5 or anything like that. I just think that, and even today, I was seeing player comps for Ace Bailey, still comparing him to guys like Jabari Smith Jr., still comparing him to guys like, Rashard Lewis, Michael Porter Jr., these really big stretch 4 type players. And now all of a sudden, he's not a shrimp. Ace Bailey is not a shrimp, but I do think that the measurement that he got and the weight is very important for his player projection, because Ace Bailey, he's the Rutgers player, freshman, 6'7.5", stand or without shoes, 202.8 pounds. He'll be around 18 years old, wingspan of 7'5" and a standing reach of 8'11". The interesting thing to me, Maxwell, was when I was watching the combine and he was doing his interview, and they had the graphic pulled up for him and everything. He was listed as Rutgers guard, Ace Bailey. And I don't think that's an accident. ESPN with Jonathan Gavoni, they have the most access of anybody that you could ever have. If he's agreeing to do this interview, everything is looked over, all inputs are given. Maxwell, the question that I have for you is, does him being listed as a guard in that aspect mean anything to you? Because it does to me. And I think it changes the evaluation a little bit. And I think that was a strategic call for his camp, because this measurement is not bad, right? He goes from being compared to guys like Michael Porter Jr. to now like OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges, who can still shoot, obviously. But the handle now, in my opinion, becomes more important.
Totally.
Because he's not just going to be one of these guys that you can park in a corner and shoot over the top of players. And now he's listed barely over 200 pounds. Now, how does he hold up against those stretch 4s and those bigger 3s? I think now we kind of almost have to go back now and look at him as a 2-3 as opposed to a 3-4.
Yeah, I think I still view him in sort of like the 3-4 mold. So something I wrote about in my column that'll be up tomorrow is that like I use I linked to it in the article. This guy Wizzy on Draft Twitter has this great like physical comparison draft tool, And like two guys that came up were like Peyton Watson and Trevor Ariza. And those were guys that like eventually were guys that you could play at the 4. The guard thing is interesting. I would say with the guard listing, I don't sweat it too much because I feel like my experience is like interacting with people in the basketball world. Like generally every player thinks they're like 2 positions down the spectrum from what they really are. Like every big thinks they're a wing. Every wing thinks they're a big guard. Like the number of players that like I've had interactions with over the years. It's like, oh yeah, I'm like a big guard. It's like, you are not a guard. You're not a guard. Or like, we heard the story, we won't name the guy, but a couple of years ago, there was a player who was at the combine and like was asked what position he played. And he was like, I played out of position all year. I'm a shooting guard. And this guy was not a shooting guard. And like, I don't know. So like, I don't sweat it too much. I think guys like to be called certain things, but functionally they play a role. I'm not hung up on it because I thought he played the 4 at Rutgers all year, and he played the 4 like a guy playing the 4. He defensively rebounded. He got in position as a low man. So I'm not really sweating it. I am, though, like you, kind of sweating the measurements a little bit, where it's like, yeah, you are, forward size, but you're not jumbo forward size. You are long for a forward, but you are very skinny for a forward. And I think your point about the handle becomes a much bigger deal because this is already a guy that plays really upright with the ball, which like it's not an uncommon thing for like bigger guys who initiate offense at a decent clip to like have a higher handle in general. But when part of your thing is like, I'm a shot maker and you've got a high handle and it's exceedingly easy to bump you off of your line because of how thin you are. And then we throw in there like, actually, you're not all that tall. Like you're 6'7.5". It's like, all right, like the critiques start to add up into something quite meaningful. Where even I think we're pretty positive about Ace all in all, but the issues do become more severe than if he were to have come in. Even at I generally in my head I subtract like 1.5 inches from every listed height.
Sure,
I would have loved 6'8.5" right now. Compared to
then you're the size of Jabari Smith Jr. or Michael Porter Jr. or Rashard Lewis. You are that big guy who can literally just shoot over the top of people. But now that he's not that size and he is, like I said, you got to look at him more in like that Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby type role now. And those guys can still shoot.
Big as a bus too. OG's like a thick dude. Like that's another difference too.
Yeah, and Mikal Bridges has a great handle. Like I mean, it's not the biggest part of his game, but it allows him to do all kinds of great shooting, like dynamic shots. So that's the knock on him. And again, we talked about this before, Maxwell. He's a stretch 4, and he's compared to guys like Jabari Smith Jr., who shot over 41% when he was in college, and Ace
better stock numbers, better snap making
35%, roughly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe even a little bit under that. So I don't know. And then if he's not a 4 and he's a 2-3 player and he's not a great shooter, yeah, the handle's got to get there, bud. Like that's kind of where I'm living at now. I think the measurements really did him not the greatest favor, because now he was once considered a lock for number 3. We're talking about Colin Knippel possibly being the 3rd pick to Philadelphia now.
Yeah. And I would say too, like the reason, if you're like, why are these guys hung up on like 1.5 inches, like 1 inch of measurement or whatever? It's like the NBA is just a game of inches. Like it is every little detail. Every inch matters, especially with like the speed of the game. Like just watch a playoff game, watch how quickly the ball moves, watch how fast guys have to be on rotations, and tell me whether or not you'd like a guy to be 1 inch taller than they are. Someone in the flag brings up in the chat brings up Cooper Flagg. I would say the big difference is like, okay, it's like, yeah, Cooper Flagg's like 0.5 inch taller. I would say the much bigger issue between the two is that Cooper Flagg's about 20 pounds heavier. Like there is a great physical difference when you're talking 20 pounds coming into a
better defender.
And like
better ball handler, better passer.
And think about the physicality of the NBA. Like we just watched Alex Caruso bodying up, fouling a decent amount of the time, Nikola Jokic. But it's a grown man's game, man. And like that 20 pounds is going to make a world of difference. And it's why like VJ Edgecombe coming in at 193 was like a sneaky, really significant measurement for me. Yep. That this guy who was listed at 180 is actually quite a bit meatier than people expected him to be. But I think we're good on Ace there. Jase Richardson was mine. I'd really warmed up to Jase out of the smaller guards in this class. Jase came in, he was listed at 6'3", came in at 6'1.5". Also came in under 180 pounds, 178.4, 6'6" wingspan, and a 8'2.5" standing reach. So like lengthwise, he's okay.
Yeah.
To me, it's more just weight and height, where it's like, okay, even the guys that tend to hit at this level, if they don't like blow it out of the water to an absurd degree, like they are usually a little bit burlier than this, like the smaller guards that we see find a lot of success, a la Jalen Brunson. But even if we're looking more like median end outcome, guys that are 6 foot, like sub 190, just tend to be guys that are a little bit easier to acquire. Period, point blank. So it's just a little bit harder for me when I'm looking at expending draft capital to look at guys like that size, where it's like the Cole Anthony, like campaign-ish type of build. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's a little uninspiring. So if he'd come in at like closer to 6'3", and then, you know, the wingspan, you know, at 6'3" with the 6'6", you know, thing, and then the standing reach is closer to 8'5", like then we're really cooking with something. But we're really looking physically at somebody who is like a TJ McConnell sized player.
Yeah, and I think TJ McConnell is like the threshold of any guard that wants to come into the NBA and play that is sub 6'4",
and like provide significant value. Like TJ McConnell's awesome. Like he's really good.
And he's a sub career 35% shooter from deep and still plays incredible minutes for any team that he's on. But Jase Richardson, son of Jason Richardson, the former NBA great slam dunk champion, been all over the league, played at Michigan State. I think, you know, it turns out obviously that he's shorter than that 6'3" listing that Michigan State had him at, which always rings true to my never trust 6'3" if you see 6'3" as a listing. That is always always a false listing.
It's a Tinder 6'3". Yeah,
that's a guy who's 5'10.5" saying when he's getting his driver's license that he's 6 foot tall.
Yeah, put me at 6 foot.
Yeah, I'm 6 foot. But anyway, now I think that he's really going to have to answer for being like a smaller off guard, because the thing that has always been his problem is that his handle isn't developed enough to where you would consider him to be a lead guard. And now that he's smaller, you're really kind of limited in the type of roles that he's going to be able to thrive in. You're really going to have to put him in a situation where he plays in a Charlotte or whatever off of a LaMelo Ball. And that length that he does have does help him defensively. And it does help him with finishing. He's a better finisher than you would think. He was in the 89th percentile at the rim, although he was at 32nd percentile at rim scoring frequency, which actually laps a lot of other guards that are in this class. Like, he got to the rim more than a lot of other smaller guards within this class. He actually rebounded really well too, and he had passable defensive metrics and drew contact. So I don't know if we learned anything that we weren't already kind of thinking in the recesses of our brain when it comes to Jase, but now the ugly truth is out there, and it does give him a little bit more of a more public ick. I would say he did go down my board a little bit, not just because of this, but because some other guys did rise up. But I'd be lying if I said that the hype didn't play a part in that. I was hopeful for a little bit more 6'3" in shoes, and he's a guy that didn't participate in the combine either. So if you're going to measure poorly and then not participate in the combine, I think that does increase the amount of doubt that NBA teams and scouts would otherwise have for you, you know?
Yep. Yeah, and I still believe in him as like a long-term pro, to be clear. My thing is always like with draft philosophy, it's like, who am I okay missing on and who am I not? And I want to make sure that I'm expending draft capital on guys that I believe, like, I don't want to draft a guy with the 15th pick that I could never trade for the 15th pick, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
you want to make sure the value makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate litmus test of that, where it's like, you know, you draft him at like 14 or 15 or whatever, like certainly a good player. If you were to re-rank the class based on, you know, VORP or whatever, I'm sure that's probably like, my gut is that he's like probably in
big
that range.
VORP guy.
Yeah, but like I'm sure like that's close to the value that he's providing. And I get that you don't want to get too cute with it, but it's also like, okay, well, like in this year's draft, would you rather have the 14th pick or do you rather have Corey Kispert? Like, some teams might take Corey Kispert, but like, I don't know.
He goes from being like a lottery guy to top 25 now, probably.
Sure. Yeah. Like, I think that number just decreases. Like, it's you draft the guy and the value plummets once you take it off the lot, kind of a thing. So that's my concern there. We're going to talk actual basketball and scrimmages after the break. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk about the scrimmages. First off, I think it's good to just start big picture, kind of like we did with the measurements here. With the scrimmages this year, I thought this was like a pretty disappointing group of guys that chose to scrimmage. There's a lot of guys where I was like, hey, why isn't this guy out there? One thing I found myself doing was like checking the athletic testing and being like, wait, this guy's not injured. He did the athletic testing. So why is he not participating in the scrimmages? So I would say all in all, my thing here is that like, I don't want to I'm generally kind of I would say a bigger believer than most in scrimmages. I think I've seen like some people like totally hand wave them. But I think if you look at recent years, while you do have your years where it's like Omax dominated, we still don't know if Omax is an NBA player. But you've also had guys like Brandon Pajemski, Scottie Pippen Jr. was really great in the scrimmages, AJ Mitchell. Ben Shepherd's been like a solid rotation guy who like won't get you killed. Like generally the guys that do well in the scrimmages, it tends to mean something. And you're on the court with a lot of other great players. So I think if nothing else, it's a solid litmus test of like, are you in this muck or are you a cut above it? I think the level of talent being a little bit lower is pretty frustrating and makes it a little bit more difficult to evaluate. And I think a lot of guys kind of blew an opportunity by not playing in these games. But do you feel similarly? Like, how are you kind of feeling coming out of it?
I think like anything, when we're talking about basketball or life in general, not to get too deep here, it all depends on the context, right? There's going to be a couple of these guys that we're going to bring up in our breakdown here momentarily that I do believe that the combine is incredibly and immensely valuable for, specifically just for their evaluation in general. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be a guy that we're going to talk about here soon that I didn't learn anything that I didn't already know about the guy. And it does have to do with the fact that on my personal board, Maxwell, I think I had maybe 2 guys that are in my first round right now, and they're way towards the back end of the first round. And then there's a couple of second rounders in here for sure. And then they went up against a lot of undrafted guys, at least on my board, guys that I just wouldn't draft. So it does hurt, especially if you played in a position where there wasn't, I would say, equal to or possibly greater value of that position within the combine. So that was really my long-winded answer of saying it depends. But we're gonna talk about some of these guys here soon that I do think, and our first guy is going to be a guy that I thought the combine was immensely valuable for my evaluation of this guy, just based on the context of his season.
100%. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then, like, I would say too, like, someone that mentioned Jalen Williams, which is a big one, and a guy he played against in the playoffs, Christian Brown, was another guy who was like a really good combine riser. So. But yeah, to my point, I think guys like Chaz Lanier or Tyrese Proctor or Eisen Almanza, like, not to throw these guys under the bus, but it's like, are you sure that you're a guy that doesn't need to play in the combine? Like, seriously? Like, to me, those were some names where I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like,
there's guys now in my there's guys in my second round range now that jumped them just because I'm like, okay, I have more answers now than questions.
Yeah. Totally.
On these guys, and it would have been beneficial for some of those other guys that they leapt for them to go out and say, no, like, everything that you feel about me is true. I'm gonna go out here and show you. And they said that throughout the commentary too. Like, Corey, who I forget his last name, played Alexander? For the Spurs. Yeah, Corey Alexander. Thank you. Corey Alexander said routinely, like, you get a lot out of this, and this guy has been through the combine process personally. He's been through the combine process as kind of a mentor and an advisor, and he says this routinely. So guy knows what he's talking about. It just blows my mind that some of the advice that these young men are either getting, or they're so sure of themselves and they're not listening to advice that they're not willing to go out there and kind of put their stock on the line and kind of prove themselves. Yeah. I think a lot of these guys probably did themselves a disservice.
Yeah, I think if you're not a first-round lock, I want to see you on that court. And if you're not, like, personally, it does rub me the wrong way a little bit. It's an evaluation.
Or maybe
that's not like a popular thing to say because people go, well, it's a data point, whatever. But like, for me, it's like, what are you afraid of? Like, what are you hiding?
One benefit that I just thought of, Maxwell, this could be like outthinking myself here, but like, maybe these guys want to be undrafted and pick the team that they go to.
Could be. Yeah, could be I don't want to show something, or maybe I have a spot where like I know a certain team likes me, and like, if I can just sit this out, then whatever. Like, that's possible.
Players got to do stuff like this for a reason. You know, I don't think it's because they're not intelligent, you know?
Sure. Let's talk about Hansen Yang. Because this is a guy, like, I guess I've been low on. It's more just like, I don't know what I was doing with him, than anything. Like, I'll be frank. My knowledge of the CBA is pretty low. You know, the games are on Synergy. I watch him and I'm like, this guy could be good. He could be bad. Like, I don't know. But he played in the scrimmages and I thought he did really well. The passing was really good. Throughout. In the first game, he was 5 for 7 from the field for 12 points. He had 2 assists. He blocked a shot. Looked really good out there. And then I'm getting the second game numbers pulled up momentarily as well. But both outings, he was really good. Second game, 11 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, and a block shot in that one as well. Just really solid gameplay from Hansen Yang. I think the biggest thing for me that I was kind of worried about coming into the week with him is I was just never big on his physicality. And I worried about the role translation. So he's a 7'1" big man out of China. He's a little bit slow footed. And there were times that showed up. Like there were times where, you know, he got burned and he didn't have the tools to recover. I worried about the strength. There was a play where if Dallas came baseline for like a strip block on him or was in transition, he might come behind him. But that was the play that stuck out to me. But man, he is really skilled. The hand-eye coordination is really good. So he was like in the right spots enough and, you know, enough of a deterrent defensively to be interesting. The passing really stood out. And like, obviously he's always been a good passer. He's always been really skilled. But what impressed me most about the passing was that he made some very accurate improvised reads. He never got too much dip on his chip. There wasn't a single pass where I was like, oh, come on. Like, why are you trying to get too fancy with it? And the last one that stood out to me was that it was very within the flow of the offense. With guys like this, where it's like you see them in the context where everything runs around them, and we'll talk about some guys who didn't do so hot, and who were like get to have the ball in their hands all the time on their current team, and then you put them in this environment, they don't know how to play. Hansen Yang made some great 0.5s. Like he made some really nice, just like, oh man, like this guy knows how to just be a part of a team kind of passes. I still think physically, like there's a lot of development that needs to happen. I feel like he's not as quick as a Şengün or as strong as a Jokic. So if you want to hit those like higher end outcomes as a skill ball center, so to speak, with some defensive deficiencies, I'd like to see him really excel in one of those two areas. But he's a much more interesting like developmental project to me now than he was before the start of the week.
One question that I want to ask you, Maxwell, I kind of flirted with this question, throwing it out there to some people, even you. So I think that my biggest takeaway, let's fast forward, and Hansen Yang is a serviceable NBA player. Do you think that when we look at these kind of non-traditional leagues, and some examples I'll throw out, obviously the CBA, which Hansen Yang is playing, I'll say the NBL, and I'll even say the overtime elite, like what we saw from some of these guys. Do you think that it's more important that we analyze the traits of these leagues rather than just the production? Because the Thompson twins, probably particularly in men, goes higher in the redraft, right? And these guys were still drafted like top 5, right? So but a lot of the commentary wasn't even necessarily had to do with them, but it was the aesthetics around their league, you know. And we've seen this with other guys too, like with what Ball did when he was playing in the NBL, right? There was a lot of efficiency stuff, but the quirkiness of these leagues, and they're not apples to apples comparison from like how one player would perform in this league compared to the NBA. I think for myself, what I need to start looking at isn't necessarily the production or like, okay, cool, like you're taller than this guy, but are you gigantic? And do you have outlier traits such as crazy processing or insane feel? Because I think it's just so easy for us to dismiss the quirkiness of some of these non-traditional leagues, and that stunted my opinion of Hansen Yang, and I needed it to see him perform well in a combine setting like this before I started really taking him seriously as a draftable guy.
Totally. I think that's spot on. And like one thing I've started to do a little bit with international guys is like I'll look at the league that they're playing in, and then I will go on Real GM and I'll just look up like the league leaders in different stats in that league. and just see like, okay, like who are they competing with? So if Hansen Yang is like a center, like who are the top like bigs over there? And it's guys like Jared Sullinger, it's Kenneth Lofton Jr., it's TJ Leaf, Dedrick Lawson. Like it's a lot of guys where it's like, okay, that guy's like a big, but like he's a little bit slow. So I know
like fours.
Yeah, like there is a real level of competition at his position there. Like these aren't scrubs. Because like some of the times, like to throw Alvidas under the bus, I guess, like I looked at some of the top producers in his league, and like they were guys that just like weren't doing a whole lot in college. And it's like, okay, well then like how excited am I going to get about this guy? Where like with Hansen Yang, it's like, okay, these guys like had a cup of coffee somewhere. Like these guys are not trash. It's just like, this is what he's kind of dealing with. So maybe account for like, he might not be as quick as I think or whatever, but I'm right there with you. I think the biggest reason I kind of lagged on Yang from a rankings perspective all year is just because I didn't know what I was looking at. Like, I'll be blunt. Like it was hard to watch this league and know what to make of it.
And that's why I think the evaluation has to go back to traits. And I know that the biggest thing about him, people that I've been talking to, I hear the foot speed thing, but I did see him like he went out and guarded Peavy along the perimeter a few times. He defended Grant Nelson on a drive. He blocked Sion James on a 3-point shot. Like he's out there and engaging on the perimeter. And I saw a picture of him without a shirt today, and he's pretty ripped. So
his combine testing was good too.
Yeah, I think that he's going to be better laterally than I'll say this for myself, and I'm willing to bet that if I felt this way, other people felt this way too. I generally just threw out the lateral concerns because I didn't know how to assess the athleticism of the CBA. I didn't, right? So, but we saw him. You talked about the passing. I won't go through all my notes on that. I did like the chemistry that he had with Elijah Martin on a few cuts. Like he found some of these like more off-ball movement guards in such a way that I was really impressed with. He had that really fun pass to Jalen Moore that cycled through the internet. But I'm intrigued with his potential shot. I think he's got great touch around the basket. He's obviously got great touch on his passes, and he connected from deep in a game setting. So I think that that's where I would value him. I do think that there are still legitimate concerns. Even defensively, he had some good moments, but I think that he lacks that general mean streak that I want in like a starting five. But for these skill ball fives, like you just put, a lot of them don't have that mean streak, like Şengün, Sabonis, dare I say, Nikola Jokic. Like they don't have these defensive mean streaks, but they'll pick you apart. They're very cerebral. And again, I think in this setting, it improved my evaluation and projection of him. Maxwell, I have him 47th on my board, and I don't know if that's ultimately where he's going to settle. He might even go higher.
Yeah, I think he's really interesting. I think the other thing that stood out to me on tape that I wanted to bring up was I thought he used his length inside really well on offense, where it felt like once he got the ball was just like immediately at the rim. Like it was sort of like a bizarre hand speed thing we don't really talk about very often. And obviously with bigs, it's like, you're supposed to keep the ball high inside. Like everyone knows that. But I feel like his ability to just like get the ball up at the basket very quickly was something that stood out to me too on tape. It's like, all right, that's good. That's good that there's no like lag time of, okay, I'm taking a second to reel in the ball. I'm trying to fly off the floor. It's like, I got the ball. All right, there it is. It's in the basket. Like I thought that stood out to me too.
I think that's an astute observation.
Another big guy who is interesting. A lot of big guys with international backgrounds that did themselves a favor this week. Maxime Raynaud, who's a guy who I've talked about on the podcast, someone like I'm personally kind of lower on, was this year's John Taffer shut it down guy. Like had a great first scrimmage. That was it. The next scrimmage, he's on commentary instead of on the basketball court. They made the decision that, hey, we did enough here. Let's call it a day. Raynaud came in at a legit 7 foot, I believe. In his one scrimmage, scored 20 points, was 2 for 5 from deep, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and only 2 turnovers. What were your thoughts on Maxime Raynaud? Because I've gotten a more mixed response than I expected from people around the league when I've asked around. Because I feel like on Twitter, the consensus is like top 20 guy now. And like, I'm still not there, and I hate to be like Debbie Downer about it, but I'm intrigued to see where you came away with it.
I'll be Debbie Downer. Maxime Raynaud, first off, I'll put the good out there.
Yeah.
Had a fantastic combine. Everything that he was supposed to do in this game, he went out and did. Now, I spoke about this earlier as how do I value these combine settings. Maxwell, his primary assignments were Michael Ruzek. Would you draft him this year?
I would not.
Okay. Lachlan Ulbrich.
I would not draft him either.
Okay. Those were the guys that he lined up against. They were significantly shorter. In Ruzek's case, he was significantly lighter. And I believe one of the youngest prospects that contributed in this combine setting, right? He did a lot to pick up his momentum this week from the production in this game. His ties to Victor Wembanyama were like talked about vehemently. And then he interviewed really well too. He made a couple of shots from deep, but missed some very open ones, which I'm like, if you're a stretch five, I expect you to knock down these clearly open ones. Drew contact, punish switches, particularly when Sears was switched on him on the block. He was okay. I have the advantage here. I'm going to do that. And he had a nice putback earlier in the game. He had some moments moving the ball, finding Silent James on a shot really stuck out to me. That was not a typical like big man next pass over type pass. He didn't do a whole lot defensively, which is where most of my concerns lie actually within his game. He did alter the shot of Jameer Watkins in game one. And that was really the only thing that spoke to me. He did have Mark Sears and Cam Jones finish over the top of him, both on layups, like really close together. That hurt my evaluation on him. There were also times where I still have concerns with his strength, although he did get listed at almost 237 pounds and a quarter inch above 7 foot. There were a few plays that stood out to me. Ulbrich sealed him pretty effortlessly on the shot. He got it on the right block, had Maxime on his back, and just completely moved him wherever he wanted. Ruzek, he did have a tough time, but there were a few moments where he held his line and really bothered some shots from Maxime too on the block. He also struggled to maintain his position on screens, got called for moving screens quite a bit. There was one that was like really bad where he tried to reposition himself like mid-screen attempt. And I was just like, oh my gosh, dude, like you are going to struggle in the NBA if you can't set screens in this setting. So again, he and his camp played this perfectly. Like this was a very ideal time for him to capitalize on the buzz, his ties to Victor Wembanyama. There's a lot of credible scouts that like him a lot more than me. And totally. I think there's a high probability, listen, that I could be wrong on him. But from what I saw in this combine setting, Maxwell, my mind did not change just because he beat up Ruzek and Ulbrich in this game.
I have him where he was coming into the week for me, which is like a big guy that you can put on a two-way. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Like I think there's enough of a shot. He takes a ton of threes. Like the big picture stuff with Raynaud, which I understand the appeal with, is for a 7-footer, the 3-point volume is exceptionally high. He took like 9 threes per 100 possessions. He made him at a 34.5% clip last year, which is great for a big man. And he can really attack downhill in a way that most big guys can't. Like he just has a really nice handle and a great like big man pump fake, big man first step that when like a plotting drop big has to come out, like he can leave him in the dust. I really like that about his game. I also like that he's a late bloomer. Like this is a guy who had no expectations coming into college and blossomed into a guy who scored 20 points per game. Everett has heard my usage spiel a million times. Like the guys who end up being good are guys who were stars in college. This guy averaged like 20 and 10 and the ACC this year, this conference realignment is still breaking my brain.
Second best player behind Cooper Flagg this year in that conference.
Yeah. So like he's obviously a really talented basketball player. And I think like, you don't want to get too cute and be like, I'm ranking him 100th. You know what I mean? Like I'm not doing any nonsense. The play that you mentioned with Sears is one that I wrote about in the article because it was emblematic of the Maxime Raynaud defensive experience, which is a guy will sort of like get him in a pick and roll setting or something like that. And it's just him in the middle between the basket and a guard, and his hands will be down so deep into the paint that they just lob a layup over him and get 2 points. And that happens way too often with Maxime Raynaud. And I would feel differently about it if I was more bullish on the passing, because I'm sure there's some people listening that are like, hey, didn't you write a column about how you love Tomislav Ivicic this year? And Tomislav Ivicic does the same thing all the time. I would say the difference is like Ivicic, I think, is like a wizard as a passer. Like he's a really great passer, super high assist rate for a big man, keeps his turnovers under control. With Raynaud, like just a guy who gets way too much dip on the ship at times. I've always mentioned, I believe guys can scale that down. But I think that the combination of like, okay, well, he can dribble. I don't really trust the vision or the passing that much. And to be fair, he had a really great interior pass for like a really nice assist during combine week as well. He's going to have to like really, really, really shoot it for me. Where like we were both really high on Quinton Post last year. Quinton Post is a guy who I had in my guaranteed contract tier of my board before the draft. And the reason was Quinton Post could really shoot. We liked how he put it on the deck. We trusted him as a passer. And he also had like a 7.5% block rate throughout his college career and a 7'4" wingspan that he really knew how to use. Even if Quinton Post isn't the fastest guy in the world, he really knew how to leverage his length. Maxime Raynaud doesn't, and I don't really trust him as a passer. So I'm still kind of seeing him in this two-way territory, even after a strong week.
I have him in my top 50, but I do think it's worth noting that Quinton Post, a guy that you and I both loved, was a late second-round pick last year in what was considered a bad draft. This is a great draft this year by all accounts. And I do have Maxime Raynaud kind of in that like mid 30s to early 40s range. Like, I don't think that he's a bad player, but if you're looking, if you're looking for someone to kind of feed into the Maxime Raynaud should be taken in the lottery machine, like I cannot get there. There are so many players that I would feel more comfortable with, especially at the position that they play. And what's important in the NBA now with their positions. I have so many question marks around Maxime, and he didn't really do any. If he would have stayed and played the second game and did something similar, maybe I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. But again, Ruzic and Ulbrich are not draftable guys, and those were his primary assignments.
I'm going to throw to you on Miles Byrd next while I do a quick household relocation on my end here. San Diego State wing, 6'4" 3/4, 181.4 pounds, 6'10" wingspan. So measurement-wise, kind of a rough start to the week for him. Came in really skinny, not quite as long as you would like for a guy who has this sort of defensive stopper reputation. And then just balls out during the scrimmages. Has a series of great games, goes 5 for 11 from 3 over the course of the week. Has 5 steals and 4 blocks over the course of 2 games. At the end of the day, basketball is played on a basketball court, and Miles Byrd played some really good basketball this week. But what were your thoughts on Miles Byrd?
I think that Miles Byrd took advantage of the combine. He was one of these players that where he could have been easily in that camp with what we were talking about earlier with Chaz Lanier, with Tyrese Proctor, some of these other guys that just didn't perform, especially after his measurements. Like Maxwell, if he would have performed bad after these measurements, I really feel like he would have been on segment 1 where we were talking about measurements that we were concerned with. Because listen, 6'4" 3/4 without shoes, that comes out to be about 6'6" in shoes. That's not what the sell on him was throughout the year. So him measuring shorter was a really big ick. And I do feel like he would have been one of these negative players that we talked about earlier. Had it not been for him, in my opinion, Maxwell, I think that he might have been the best player of the entire combine in terms of production on both ends of the floor. I don't think that his offensive heights were as high as some of these other guys that performed really well, but I do think that he was the most consistent on both ends of the floor. He hit so many threes, a lot of them off the catch, but some of those shots off the catch were off of high degrees of difficulty and deep range. He was reliable as a connective passer within the flow of the offense and within transition. He made a fun pass to Tahad in game 3 for a 3, multiple looks for teammates in transition. He was able to get some paint touches, but not a whole lot. But it didn't seem like anything that he couldn't do. I felt like that was kind of worth noting, that he did get into that next level of the defense, even though that's not necessarily his game. So I really like that a lot. But I think the thing that was most encouraging to see after those measurements was how stout and how impressive he was on the defensive end against several different types of opponents. Like he blocked Lachlan Ulbrich in one of the games. He blocked John Tonji on a pull-up 3. He had several rips from ball handlers that resulted in transition finishes. I was just so pleased to see how his hustle and athleticism proved it kind of solidified the production that we saw in so many regards to Miles Byrd this year, rather than these physical limitations that could have been perceived due to the kind of suboptimal measurements that he had earlier in the week.
Yeah, I'm on a similar page with you. I thought Yeah, it could have been. He started off in the danger zone this week for sure, and that was something that even as a big Miles Byrd guy throughout the year, like at one point when the shot was going in early in the year, I had him at like 10 or 11. Like I had him super high on my board. The issue was always going to be that, like, if you looked at the guys statistically who he profiled similar to, like Robert Covington or Matisse Thybulle, like he's just quite a bit thinner than those guys. Like, and he struggled at the rim all year because of that. And even in the combine setting, like he did have one play where he got deep in the heart of the paint, had to finish against physicality, and sort of like I always call it like shrimping up in my notes. Like just kind of like curled and like threw the ball up over his head instead of playing through the contact. Like that's going to be a real issue for him.
He played in a long sleeve baggy t-shirt again. He kept his little trademark look going too.
Yeah, the Billie Eilish basketball style, as I call it. Just the baggy clothes on for a basketball game. But I can't quit Miles Byrd. Like there's certain guys in every draft where I'm like, the value proposition is just a little too good. And look, like, is he too small for the kind of player that like he profiles to be? Maybe. And like some of the weird defensive habits were there too. Like he got turned around a few times, played from behind a little too much. But at the end of the day, like so much of the game that OKC has like really shown this year is like winning the turnover battle, and a guy that is just always stealing the ball, always blocking shots. And then offensively, I say this again and again, for guys on offense who are not the star, the role is move the ball, take threes. Miles Byrd knows how to move the ball. He knows how to take threes, and he was hitting them this week. And I know that historically the 3-point percentage isn't great. I'm not the biggest free throw percentage as an indicator guy, but he's always had good accuracy there. To me, like I am just like at a certain point on the board, if he stays in, like I'm just drooling if Miles Byrd is on the board. And I see that value proposition of like, if I can just take this guy, get him in the weight room for a year, this is a guy that if he goes back to school could go 12 next year. And I could get him at 30. Like I realize this could go wrong. I realize the shot could be fake. Maybe he doesn't have the body to put on the size. I get all of it. At a certain point, it's too good for me to pass up.
I'm right there with you, dude. I'm pulling up my board right now as you're talking, just so I can be honest with where I have him. I have him 20 on my board, and I don't know if I've ever had him outside of my top 25. And it does come down to the value. And for a guy who did struggle with shooting consistency this year, I do think that plays a factor in his perception across multiple different reputable scouting outlets. But I think the defense is special. And when you compare him to Matisse Thybulle, I think that might be his most common kind of comparison. The shots that he takes are difficult. They're not your run-of-the-mill, I'm going to stand here and be open, let the defense collapse away from me, and then just shoot. Like, he takes very deep shots, like even beyond NBA range. So I would feel comfortable in his long-term shot projection. I genuinely would. And then the defensive stuff, it's not just that he's a steal merchant, like where he gambles in passing lanes or helps off of his man and tries to poke out the ball when the guy is kind of like spinning into a move. Like he'll straight up steal your cookies right from your hand. He will rotate and make blocks, as I annotated earlier with the Lachlan Ulrich block that he had. He also does the winning type plays too, Maxwell, where someone comes down with the rebound and he'll just poke it loose. Like, okay, reset your possession. Like, you're not going to get an easy putback. So I value that type of motor and hustle. And I would make a bet on this guy, especially if I had a winning team and I needed to solidify what might be kind of a short rotation in my NBA team. I think this is well worth a gamble in the 20s.
Yeah, and I even love, like I mentioned, just like the domestic draft and stash, as they call it, of just like, let me just get this guy's body into gear for a year and solidify the confidence in the shot. Like I'm good with that too. Yanic Konan Niederhauser from Penn State. Whew. Big mover this week for a lot of people. And I would throw myself in that mix too. Penn State big man, didn't have a lot of buzz, was a G League elite camp invitee who earned the call up, measured 6'11" and a quarter with a 7'3" and a quarter wingspan, 9'3" standing reach. I thought he was spectacular in these games. And he was spectacular in a way that like lends itself to NBA translation, where it was just like, wow, you did the boring stuff really well. You got up and down the floor really fast. You rolled to the basket with real gravity and rolled there fast. And the second you got the ball, you were off the floor and dunking it. You were deterring shots around the basket. You held your own when you were in space. Like, when you had to dribble, like it wasn't anything special, but you didn't turn it over. Like you didn't dribble it off your foot. Like you were at least comfortable putting the ball on the floor. I know like rim runner, shot blocking big man is like a little boring in today's league. Is like more and more bigs shoot it. More and more bigs can make really great plays as a passer. That stuff isn't here, but like when you look at Daniel Gafford, like this is a guy that has those traits. Athletic testing was bonkers, by the way. Like in the Cali Dress Combine score, had 100. Like he did a really great job of jumping and running. And when you watch him on the basketball court, you're like, that is a tall man that knows how to run and jump and catch the basketball and deter shots. And that's like the primary job of most big men. So I'm good with him. Like, I think I might have him higher than you think. Like, this is a guy I might end up with in the guaranteed contract tier just because he does the stuff he's going to be asked to do really well. And it might not be exciting, but hey, being a competent player is a lot more exciting than a guy who's probably going to suck. So that's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, and shout out to Jam, who wrote about him before Combine season and everything started. Legit wrote a very well-detailed article about how Yanic could end up being an NBA player. And the intriguing aspect about him even coming into the Combine was that he's huge. He's a defensive nuisance. And then he still managed to score 12 points per game for Penn State without having the most polished offensive game. So I think that if you're optimistic, you can say, hey, look, we have ready-made defender, great physical tools, athletic freak of nature, and can finish within an arm's reach of the basket. Let's just show him how to make a couple of quick reads out of a couple positions, and we have a very sharp player. Just like Hansen Yang, I feel like the Combine benefited Yanic. One of 4 prospects called up from the G League Combine, as you just stated earlier. The start to the Combine was a little concerning as he committed a turnover on a jump pass and then soon after set an illegal screen. But then it was just all systems go from there. Ran the floor incredibly well, showing off his athleticism. He just finished everything around the rim, from offensive rebounds leading to putback dunks, running to the rim after slipping screens for dunks, drew a ton of contact when he didn't dunk it, finished an alley-oop where the pass came from half court in game 3. That was insane to see. He even had a couple drives where he finished with some touch too. So in game 3, he had a couple of drives where he didn't just dunk it. He showed a little bit of touch. Obviously blocked some shots. I think the concerns with his hands on offense are that they can kind of portray him at times, not on oops or anything like that, but on rebounds. He can play with the ball a little too low, and he doesn't really hold the ball strongly in those types of moments all the time. I think his touch looks that he made were awesome, but there's still some polish that needs to be had. And I do think, we were talking in the chat a few days ago, maybe a week ago, and one of the things that Metcalf pointed out, who is Dr. Defense within our No Ceilings chat, is that he does try to block everything, and that showed itself true in the Combine, particularly when Jameer Watkins hit him with the nasty up and under. That play really
nice from Jameer,
who also had a great Combine, but probably in the honorable mentions category there. But yeah, I just think that you probably have a more polished, well put together Hassan Whiteside top player whenever you're looking at Niederhauser here. And I have him kind of in a similar range as I do Hansen Yang. I kind of have him in that early to mid 40s range now and feeling really good about it.
Yeah. Also sort of a late bloomer, like was the guy who played at Northern Illinois last year and like rebounded less in the MAC than he did in the Big Ten. And like, again, like you're going to look at the assist rate and it's going to be low, but it was even lower with a higher turnover rate last year. Like, and the role was a little bit simplified. Like they did not use him particularly well, to be blunt, but like just took on more usage in the bigger league and got better. Like, I think he's kind of a ball of clay with a little bit of, I don't think there's like such a high level of feel that there's like a genuine, like this guy could be a starter. Like, I don't think like there's that kind of upside probably. But I think like just the raw tools and ability to produce in a simple way gives him like a really nice role player path. And maybe you can, like you said, just get us a couple simple reads in there and you're cooking with something.
Like Thomas Bryant is playing in the Pacers right now in the playoffs and spot minutes. I don't think it's too out of the question that Niederhauser could do kind of similar things to that of Thomas Bryant.
Any quick, like, hey, this guy was pretty good of the guys that don't have eligibility left. Like I thought Sion James was good.
Yeah, I think Sion had some really strong moments. Jameer Watkins had a strong game 3. We talked
Bates and Bryce Williams, who are the two, like, one good game, one bad game guy, where I was like, I'm still kind of interested.
Even Tahad Pettiford's bad game, I think, got overstated a lot. I don't think it was as bad as what people made it out to be. I thought his passing feel really showed itself in game 3. I thought his defense and rebounding was still actually pretty impressive. In my opinion, he just missed shots. And whenever I'm watching a guy miss shots, like, okay, what else are you doing? I felt pretty comfortable with the things that he was doing when his shot wasn't falling. And then, I'm probably the biggest, Elijah Martin supporter out there. I thought that he had really strong performances. He's not really like a combine setting type player, but I still thought that he did more on the ball than what I was expecting. Made some great sharp cuts away from the ball from Hansen Yang, gave him some reliable outlet passes, and his defense was okay. I thought he had some good moments.
All right. Sounds good. We're going to do a quick break, and then we're going to do our stay or go lightning round. So stick with us. We'll be right back. So for the purpose of this exercise, I think we're going to say stay means stay in school and go means go pro.
Okay. I might just say college or pro for the sake of my own brain.
Easy enough. Okay. College or pro. You were just talking about him. Number 1 on the list, Tahad Pettiford from Auburn, who I'll give my top thoughts real quick. I thought he was way better than I expected him to be. I've been low man on Tahad internally all year. I thought the defense was a lot better than I expected in the first game in particular. I really like how immediately he just like got after it and was like forcing a ball out of bounds and like just playing with a real level of aggressiveness, made some good passes. I thought the second game was like really worrying. Like to me, it was he just kept forcing the issue. He really struggled to deal with an NBA length and like physical tools defender and Jameer Watkins. I would say go back to school. The vibe I get is that like the demand is there, which I like. Is like I'm always going to have a hard time with this type of player, like the smaller guard who's like, it's just not like exceptional in any one area, I guess you could say, but like really well rounded. With the value proposition, like in the things you're talking about earlier, like I just don't see it. So I would say college for me.
Okay, and I want to point out too for the audience that are watching and listening, we were going to share the names that you had prepared, but I want to live in the moment. I asked you not to share them with me. So I am completely caught off guard by the names that you're mentioning. I like Tahad. I think that his measurements for the combine were actually favorable for the height that he was listed over. I think it was 6.5 inches, which goes a long way for what we were kind of hearing behind the scenes on what his measurement was going to be. Strong game 1. And again, there's going to be difference of opinion of game 3 for him, which was his second game. If the shot's not falling, I felt like he did enough winning stuff to where you can kind of live with him having these tough moments. I would have him stay. I have him within my top 20. I know that might not be popular, but I like him a lot. I would stay if I was him.
Okay. Up next, Carter Knox.
College.
Yeah.
Go to college.
I just don't think there's much to say. Like, I think this week he just like existed out there. Jameer Watkins, who's a sneaky guy who has an extra year of eligibility that you might not expect.
Yeah, I would go pro. I don't know if there's going to be anything more that he can do in college that he hasn't already shown. And I think that there's going to be enough buy-in for the defense that he had. And he had great showing of offense. Even his first game was decent, I would say within that Elijah Martin type mold where he was decent. And then the second game, he showed a lot of offense that I think helped his stock a lot. So I would go pro if I was him.
I thought the shot looked good. He took that one like super deep 3 in one game too, where it's like, oh, okay, like you believe in yourself as a shooter. And like the up and under play that he made on Niederhauser was just like a little things like that where it's like, okay, like that you struggled at the rim, but like you've got a little bit of craft. Okay, that people question the shot, you're taking a deep 3. Like I like
reading the scouting report too.
Yes, I like when guys play in a way that it's like, all right, you're trying to convince me of the things that I'm worried about, and I appreciate that. Thomas Sorber, I think he's got to go pro.
You got to go pro. I think that there's also been like a small army kind of assimilating around the lottery range. I've seen other mock drafts put him to like that 12 range where we put him to the Chicago Bulls. I've seen that in a couple places. So yeah, you go ahead and capitalize on this. You had great measurements. You got a lot of positive momentum.
Milos Uzan is for me like staying college. I thought he had a rough
college.
Year. Yep.
Yeah, he even had his coach in the commentary like trying to pump him up while he did not have the best outing. I'll put it politely.
Yeah, Mackenzie and Baco.
This one's genuinely tough because I think so many people, myself included, had written him off because of the Indiana situation. Very strong combine, measured well. 3-point shot was bonkers, and that was kind of the sell on him earlier in the year, and the shot just kind of went away. Mm-hmm. Interesting situation for him in Indiana. Man, I would almost say go back because I don't know if you're a first-round pick this year, but I think that you go back and kind of build on the momentum that you had, and that, especially now that he's transferred away too.
Yep, going to be playing buckyball next year, so going to be playing with a great coach and a tempo and a scheme that I think is a little bit more built to what he is as a player. I think if he stayed in, it would be less puzzling than it was a month ago. But I think with like the priors just being what they are, it's like I'm just kind of not moved. Like you're a shooter who hasn't really shot it yet, so I'd
be okay with him.
I'm way more interested. Yeah, I could tolerate it.
Yeah, you're probably a second round pick now, right? Like, do you not put him in your second round?
I might. I haven't like. I kind of assumed he was just going to go back, so I haven't really been factoring him into things too much. But I might.
He's in my second round now.
PJ Haggerty.
There's another tough one.
His situation's weird too, because he's like in the portal with like he's in kind of no man's land right now. Like he's in the portal.
That was going to be my question. I don't think that he's committed anywhere, and I'm not sure if he's going back to Memphis. If he goes back to Memphis, I don't know if it would really make sense because I don't know if you're going to do anything different that you haven't already shown.
See, I think he has like a real chance in college because like the foul drawing is like really special. And I think if he can just slow down his playmaking process and be a guy that like leads the offense, there's like some Trey Jonesy like kind of stuff there that I really like. I think if he goes in now, I'm just like, it's going to be, to me, he's a guy where it's like, I'm going to see what you're doing in 3 years after you like run a G League offense and see if you figured out how to like read the floor and make passes a little bit better. But if you're coming in now, I'm just like, nah.
But we do see it quite often where we say guys should go back and it doesn't really work out. And then their stock falls. So I would say if he's getting like, yeah, we're going to draft you. Yeah, I would stay. Like, even if he's a mid to late second, I would go ahead and take that because as a guard with new classes and stuff like that coming in all the time, like he might not ever get another guaranteed time to say, yeah, I would get drafted.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Nate Biddle, who's another like weird guy with a year of eligibility who played at elite camps, so we didn't see him at the actual combine, but it seemed like he was fine. I mean, he didn't get the call up. I think he's sneaky good, but I think he's also a guy that like could benefit from the Kalkbrenner thing of like maybe one more year sneaky good, and like just sort of solidifies you as like a late first, early second guy.
Yeah, and what we see it too with guys like we're looking at it with Calc, where we saw it with Trace Jackson Davis, where if he can just do a little bit of dribbling, that goes a long way for a big man evaluation. Where I just slid Kalkbrenner up to like 23 on my big board today, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
feeling pretty good about it.
I have him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say go back to college.
Yeah, I think it's tricky just because I don't know how excited people are going to get. Because like with Kalkbrenner, it's like there's like some real data things you can point to, and with Biddle there are too, but I just don't know like how excited teams are going to be. Like we've got to get this guy who's like 22 and can't jump.
He needs to get out of Oregon.
You just didn't have a very strong week. Would I draft him? Yeah, 100%. But I just don't know if consensus is there.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I would say go back and have yourself another year.
I agree.
Miles Byrd, we talked about. I think stay in. Maybe that's me being too much of a Miles Byrd guy, but RJ Lewis is a go back for me.
Does he have a new home yet?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Still in the portal.
How much money does he want to make? This is where his conversation gets interesting.
Yeah, I would stay in school for him. Like I've been an RJ Lewis guy all year. Like I've had him really high. I've had him in the first round at points throughout the year. When I talked about Hansen Yang and like how well the passing scaled back, I felt like he was like the opposite, where it was like every time I stopped the ball, I'm like, quit doing that. And like he would miss another shot. It's just like, all right, there you go. Like I still like the idea of what he could be. I just don't think he's ready to be that yet. And I think like one more go around in college would probably be best.
It was weird because his game 3 actually wasn't that bad in terms of shooting, but the decision making kind of seemed to regress too. And I don't know how bad of a taste NBA teams have in their mouth with the way that his time, ended.
And yet, and then a bad combine to follow it up is rough. That's a tough sell.
Yeah, I would advise him to go back if it was me. Go back to college.
Sort of the opposite is Darion Williams, who is like polar opposite players. Like, and I like both guys, but like with RJ,
I think they're pretty similar actually.
It's
like
it's
their
odd.
NBA role. Yeah.
Both skill guys who need to like sort of scale back in their role. One who is super athletic and can't shoot, one who can shoot but is not athletic at all. Darion was just like a ghost out there this week. He's another guy who's like in the portal, and I don't know if he has a home. And it's like, I loved you at Texas Tech, man. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what that was about.
Toppin's going to help you get eyes on you too. So
yeah, Toppin and like Christian Anderson, another year of him. Like he had like a really good year for a guard in that sort of mold. Like that's just a team that I really like. They got Luwan Watts and Tyree Bryan in there too. That is a squad.
Oh, Luwan Watts is going to be
Luwan Watts is a baller. Tyree Bryan, low-key a baller. Tyree Bryan shot like an absurd percentage from 3 and is built like a tank.
Love it.
I think he's like a sneaky margins guy next year. But yeah, it's like, man, I wish you could just stay there. But I guess Luwan Watts like is sort of the replacement. Like that is sort of like you just kind of got the same kind of guy.
I would tell him to go back. He didn't do anything.
I don't think he did enough. And I think with the athletic questions too, like that looms over all of it. Where like if I felt a little bit better about him, like being able to physically like cover ground physically and things like that, I think it would be a different conversation. But that's been
he was smaller height wise too than I would have anticipated in this.
What did he come in at?
I'd have to go back and look. This is bad.
But I know I'm right there with you though. Like I
think it was like
the measurements being stubby.
5-ish,
6'4.5" with a 6.5 wingspan, 8'5" standing reach, 236 pounds.
Yeah.
So he was the same size as Sion James, but I don't think there's a question about who wins a foot race. to put it mildly. So
same size as Miles Byrd too.
Yeah. And then Yanic Konan Niederhauser from Penn State. He's got another year. I think capitalize on this and just go, because he's the guy who's not in the portal. It's a great. You had a great coaching situation there, like Penn State, low key, good coach, old VCU.
They do good things.
I like better squad than people realized last year. Won over 50% of games on their year. Rough finish in the Big Ten, but they're solid. I think he could go back. I don't know like who else is even on that team anymore. But
I think it would depend on
what their NIL situation is,
what he wants to do, right? Because clearly he's shown enough to where he was, like I said, one of 4 guys that were called up from the elite camp,
and then was also like the best guy at the next thing, or one of them.
Yeah, and he was one of 4 guys that we decided that we wanted to talk about in this combine setting. I think that he could, if he wants to. If the goal is to just get drafted, I would advise him to stay in the draft. I would advise him to go pro, because like I said, I have him kind of early mid 40s range right now. And if that's what he wants, then based off of how I would do things, I would tell him to stay in the draft.
Yeah. I would say stay is my gut. Like, I think there's real momentum there. And I think it's also a situation where I'm going to pull up their roster cast on Bartorvik next year. But it's like last year, you at least had a really great point guard setting you up in Ace Baldwin. I don't know what their roster situation is this year. It's Freddie DeLeon, who's more of a 2. Caden Mingo, who I'm not familiar with, who's an incoming freshman. So, I don't know. I feel like.
And he didn't enter the portal from what I understand either.
I don't believe so. I think he's just Penn State or NBA.
Yeah, I would say NBA.
Cedric Coward, a guy who didn't play, but was one of the best measurement guys, running with some big ones. I think he's got to stay. People are talking like near lottery at this point, so I think you stay.
Yeah, I was gonna jokingly ask you this name.
Stay in the draft, go pro. I got my whole thing backwards. NBA for
yeah, it's okay. I was gonna jokingly ask you this name if you didn't ask me him, because let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
how high is too high?
I think because of the value this type of player provides, I don't think lottery is out of the question.
Okay. Let me ask you specific numbers.
Sure.
Okay. Let's have some fun here. Let me call up my big board. I'm really wrestling with this one. I'm actually writing about him for this upcoming week, so I'm pretty excited about it. So I mentioned earlier that I have him 12th on my big board right now.
Yeah.
I have him behind CMB and Rasheer Fleming. Is 12 too high?
I don't think so, because so I'm like more looking at this from the perspective of if I go to Tankathon and I look at the draft order, just like, does he make sense with these teams? Because like we know a lot of teams tend to approach the draft. It's just like, we gotta get our guy. And like a lot of times it can be a trade up. So you never know how it's going to unfold. But like, would he make sense in Toronto where they have a lot of guys that can handle it and not a lot of guys that can shoot? Yes. Would he make sense in Houston where they have a lot of guys that can make plays and they need some more shooting? Yes. Does he make sense in Portland where they have a lot of guys who are going to command on-ball usage and could use more off-ball players? Yes. Does he make sense in Chicago where they don't really have a lot of wing depth, but they have a lot of guards? Yes. Does he make sense in Atlanta where they like guys that can just plug and play next to Trae Young? Yes. Like, you go down the list and he fits in really well with a lot of teams in that range. So would it surprise me if he goes that high? I don't think it would at this stage. It's going to depend how the board breaks. But also, like, you got to remember, like, funky stuff happens when guys fall. Like, no one would have thought that, like,
Matas would have been outside.
Or that, like, that, like, Matas would side that far. Or that, like, Jalen Hood-Schifino would go ahead of Cam Whitmore. But like certain teams, like they just like, hey, this is the guy that we want, and then other guys fall. Like Coward might be a guy that teams want, and then somebody funky falls that you might not expect because like the team falls in love with the idea of like, this kid is huge, he moves exceptionally well. We know he shoots, we know he competes defensively, he's got good instincts as a ball mover and off-ball defender, and we trust the developmental curve and that he's going to keep improving.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but like as I'm doing this article, the only other player in college basketball that compared to him across the board was Konan, who is now getting mocked to Philadelphia. I also think Cedric Coward makes sense on Philadelphia as well. So I'm struggling now, Maxwell, because I'm looking at, would you rather have him or Nick Clifford?
I still like Nick a lot because I'm still like I think the dribble pass shoot element is a lot more there with Coward, where I think Coward is more like a more of an off-ball guy. Like I think Coward to ascend to like a higher level of offensive option would require a bit of outlier like handle development. Like I still just like Nick a little bit more.
Do you like him or Carter Bryant better?
I like Carter Bryant better. I think like just I think the defensive movement is like a little bit more consistent with Carter Bryant. But if you told me Cedric Coward had a better pro career, I wouldn't like be shocked.
Yeah, and I have Carter Bryant 7th on my board. Like, let me ask you this: do you like him or Trey Johnson better? I know you're not the biggest Trey Johnson guy.
I like Trey Johnson better. I think Trey is like a really safe bet to just like play in the NBA for a long time because of how well he shoots it.
Okay, yeah, I'm really struggling with how high is too high with him, because we're giving guys like Konan a lot of credit, and rightfully so. Like, he produced all season long. But there are some aspects of Coward's game that if we're looking at role, not just like how many tools do you have in the toolbox, but like who can excel in a specific role, I think that they're both going to be pretty similar in terms of role on an NBA team. Is that crazy to think that Cedric Coward could be better than Konan in like that off-guard role? Especially on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think there's a world where like Konan is the guy that struggles in the playoffs a little bit more, but I think Khan's like awesome. I love Khan. I have Khan.
I like Khan too.
So yeah, I think like the dribbling is just like such.
I don't think he's that bad of a dribbler, though. I don't think he's that bad.
He is. I'm Mr. Cedric Coward. I've been on this dude since he was a sophomore.
I know you have,
but like, I think it's a real limitation for him.
I think he could get there. I mean, we talk about all the time.
If anyone's going to do it, it's him. The kid's a nut in terms of his work ethic. So
Rutgers is always big on like, what are the two easiest things for NBA teams to feel like they can develop, and he's always said from his time talking to NBA teams, it's shooting and handle. Like,
it could be.
I'm struggling.
You're good. You're good. Last one, because we got to wrap it up. Axel Lendeborg, who I think is probably the most like tenuous financial spot where like, I think he's a first round guy. I don't think he played like one in the second scrimmage game where it was just a little like, ooh, you're just a little too much part of the scenery for a guy who's about to make $3 million for me to believe that you're going to stay in this draft.
I don't know if I can answer this one because like I shared in the group chat the other day, like I got some pretty reliable
some tips. I would say my gut is I think he still goes back to school, and I could be wrong, but I think you just like look at what you would have, where you would have to get drafted in order to command the amount of money that he's about to get at Michigan, and I just think you go back to school and like teams are always going to want the 6'9" guy that can dribble, pass, and maybe shoot and play defense. You don't want to Coleman Hawkins yourself. Like that's always a possibility. You don't want to Coleman Hawkins yourself, but I think he's a little better than that.
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable giving any more comments.
You're fine. That's fine. You're good. So we will put a bow on it right there. So you mentioned you're working on a Cedric Howard article.
Yeah, I sure am. I've already started on that this past weekend. It'll be up on Thursday unless I get it done earlier, and we got to swap things around. Sometimes my stuff gets slid up to Wednesday, but right now plan for Thursday. Really Cedric Howard's really capitalizing on the hype. I kind of touched on that on the prelude, going back through draft history and giving some other examples of guys who capitalized on hype and it was worth it. Capitalized on hype, and we haven't seen a lot of good production come out of those types of players. Just kind of spoil the ending. I really like Cedric Howard. If you didn't gather that from the conversation earlier, the film compares out well. He compares out well statistically to other guys who've gone before him, and the only other guy in his class that can kind of do the same things that he does is Conca. So I'm a big Coward guy. And then to Maxwell, kind of spoil this, but you're not going to be on the show next week.
Correct.
I do have a very, very cool guest lined up. I don't want to drop the name just in case like he gets like a sore throat or something and has to cancel. But if all things work out right, we're going to have a very fun show next week as we're continuing to try to bring in more outside guests so we can get more opinions put out there for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a combine recap coming up. I get into a little bit more depth on some of the guys we talked about measurements a lot more, as well as some guys that we didn't cover on this episode. So go check that out. Like Stephen mentioned, I will be out of town next weekend. But yeah, we've been full. I'm content with like our prospective guest list. So
some big time names, man,
for sure. So that'll do it for this week. Stay tuned to our podcast feed. It's draft season, so we've got different content every day on the No Ceilings NBA feeds. Check that out. Subscribe, NoCeilingsNBA.com, at Stephen G. Hoops on Twitter, at Boundboards on Twitter. That'll do it. We'll see you all next time.
Much love, y'all.